You're watching the History Fella channel. In this video we're looking at the Battle of Belmont. At the beginning of the war, the critical border state of Kentucky, with a pro-Confederate governor but a largely pro-Union legislature, declared neutrality between the opposing sides. Pro-Confederate Kentuckians crossed into Tennessee to enlist, but the Union men openly formed a recruiting camp inside Kentucky, violating the state's neutrality. In response, Confederate Major General Leonidas Polk moved Confederate forces into Kentucky on September 3, 1861, and occupied Columbus, a key position on the bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River. 3 days later, Union Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant seized Paddock. Grant, commanding the District of Southeast Missouri, requested permission from Theater Commander Major General John C. Fremont to attack Columbus, but no orders came. For the next 2 months, only limited demonstrations were conducted against the Confederates. Fremont learned that the Confederates planned to reinforce their forces in Arkansas, and on November 1st he ordered Grant to make a feint towards Columbus to keep the Confederates there. Grant sent about 3,000 men under Colonel Ridgely Oglesby into southeastern Missouri. Grant learned that Confederate reinforcements were moving into Missouri to intercept Ogleby's column. He sent reinforcements and also ordered Brigadier General Charles F. Smith to move from Paddock into southwestern Kentucky to distract the Confederates. Grant chose to attack Belmont, a ferry landing and tiny hamlet of 3 shacks, directly across the river from Columbus. Grant's expeditionary command numbered 3,114 officers and men, and was organized into 2 brigades under Brigadier General John A. McClelland and Colonel Henry Dougherty, 2 cavalry companies and an artillery battery. On November 6th, escorted by the gunboats USS Tyler and USS Lexington, Grant's men left Cairo, Illinois, on the steamboats Alex Scott, Chancellor, Keystone State, Belle Memphis, James Montgomery, and Rob Roy. Confederate Major General Leonidas Polk had 5,000 troops guarding Columbus when he learned of Grant's movements. He assumed that Columbus was their primary objective and that Belmont was a feint. He ordered 2,700 men under Brigadier General Gideon J. Pillow to Belmont, retaining the rest to defend Columbus. When he reached Belmont, Grant found Camp Johnston, a small Confederate observation post, supported by an artillery battery. He decided to attack to keep the Confederates from reinforcing Major General Sterling Price or Brigadier General M. Jeff Thompson of the Missouri State Guard, and to protect Oglesby's exposed left flank. At 8:30 a.m. on November 7th, Grant's force disembarked at Hunter's Farm, 3 miles north of Belmont, out of range of the 6 Confederate batteries at Columbus. He marched his men south and east on a single road. A mile away from Belmont, they formed a battle line in a cornfield. The line consisted of the 22nd Illinois Infantry, 7th Iowa Infantry, 31st Illinois Infantry, 30th Illinois Infantry, and the 27th Illinois Infantry, intermixed with a company of cavalry. The Confederate battle line on a low ridge northwest of Belmont, from north to south, was made up of the 12th Tennessee Infantry, 13th Arkansas Infantry, 22nd Tennessee Infantry, 21st Tennessee Infantry, and the 13th Tennessee Infantry. Grant's attack drove into the Confederate skirmish line and for the remainder of the morning, both armies, consisting of green recruits, advanced and fell back repeatedly. By 2 p.m. the fighting became one-sided, as Pillow's ill-sighted line began to collapse, and the Confederates began withdrawing towards Camp Johnston. Grant was constantly at the front, leading his men. His horse was shot from under him, but his aide, Captain William S. Hillier, offered his mount and Grant continued to lead. The orderly retreat began to panic, though, when 4 Federal field pieces opened up on the retreating soldiers. A volley from the 31st Illinois killed dozens of Confederates, and the Union soldiers attacked from 3 sides and surged into the camp. After clearing the obstructions of fallen timber that formed an abatis, the Confederates abandoned their colors and their artillery and ran towards the river, attempting to escape. Grant's inexperienced soldiers became, in his own words, demoralized from victory. Brigadier General McClernand walked to the center of the camp, which now flew the Stars and Stripes, and asked for 3 cheers. A bizarre carnival-like atmosphere prevailed. The troops were carried away by the joy of their victory, having captured several hundred prisoners and the camp. To regain control of the men who were plundering and partying, Grant and others ordered the camp set on fire. In the confusion, the blinding smoke wounded Confederate soldiers in some of the tents and were accidentally burned to death. This was causing the returning Confederates to believe that the prisoners had been deliberately murdered. The Federals began to march back to their transports, taking with them 2 captured guns and 106 prisoners. They were suddenly attacked by Confederate reinforcements brought over from Columbus on the transports Prince and Charm, who threatened to cut off Grant's retreat. These were the men of the 15th Tennessee Infantry, the 11th Louisiana Infantry, and mixed infantry under Pillow and Colonel Benjamin F. Cheatham. By this time, Major General Leonidas Polk had also crossed the Mississippi River from Columbus and took charge of the Confederate forces during the fighting. As the Union men turned to face the Confederate reinforcements, the cannon Lady Polk fired into their ranks from Columbus, and numerous other Confederate guns opened fire. The Union gunboats exchanged fire in a battle with the Confederate batteries. Grant said, "Well, we must cut our way out as we cut our way in." Although a breach was made through the encircling Confederates, the rear of the Union column suffered severely as it ran the gauntlet. When Grant reached the landing, he learned that one of the Union regiments was unaccounted for. He galloped back to look for it, but found only Confederate soldiers moving in his direction. He spun his horse and raced for the river, but saw that the riverboat captains had already ordered the mooring lines cast off. Grant wrote in his memoirs, "The captain of the boat had just pushed out, recognized me, and ordered the engineer not to start the engine. He then had a plank run out for me. My horse seemed to take this into situation. He put his 4 foot on the bank without hesitation or urging, and with his hind feet well under him, slid down the bank and trotted on board." While embarking on the transports, the Confederates began reaching the riverside and began peppering the men and boats. The 2 Union woodenclads fortunately kept the attackers at bay, while the transport cut their howitzers and backed out into the current. While the river boats were returning to Paddock, the missing Illinois regiment was seen marching upriver, and the men were taken aboard. In the retreat, Grant lost his bay horse, saddle, mess chest, and gold pen, while McClernand lost his handsome iron-framed cot, field desk with dispatches, and an inkstand inscribed with his name. The Confederates viewed Belmont as a Southern victory, since Grant had staged an attack and been driven off. Polk Superior General Albert Sidney Johnston remarked that the 7th of November will fill a bright gap in our military annals and be remembered for gratitude by the sons and daughters of the South. On the evening of November the 7th and the morning of November the 8th, Grant recalled the units he had ordered forward in Missouri and Kentucky. One Union soldier commented, "Well, Grant got whipped at Belmont, and that scared him, so that he countermanded all our orders and took all the troops back to their old stations by forced marches." However, Grant viewed the battle very differently. In his memoirs he states, "The two objectives with the Battle of Belmont was fully accomplished. The enemy gave up an idea of detaching troops from Columbus. His losses were very heavy for that period of the war." A Mississippi diarist viewed it as a rout of Grant and wrote, "I went over to the battlefield today. It was an awful sight. The Yankees, under a flag of truce, were burying their dead comrades. They would sometimes put as many as 10 poor fellows in one grave, and just barely cover them up." Union losses were 607, 120 dead, 383 wounded, and 104 captured or missing. Confederate casualties were slightly higher at 641, 105 killed, 419 wounded, 106 captured, and 11 missing. A noteworthy result of the battle was the combat and large unit command experience Grant gained. It also gave President Abraham Lincoln, who was desperate for his armies to attack the Confederates, a positive impression of Grant. If you found the information in this video helpful, please feel free to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.